everyone, Robert Ferringo of Doc Sports, back once again with the next team up in my 2023 NFL Power Rankings, the number 22 Jacksonville Jaguars. We have a very special guest with us for today's video, Carlos Sanchez of the Black and Teal website, part of the fan-sided family of blogs. We will get to Carlos in one moment, but first, got to pay those bills, right? If you enjoy this video, be sure to like and subscribe the Doc Sports YouTube channel. You will get daily free play videos and other sports betting information from some of the top minds in the sports betting industry. Also, be sure to go down in the description below, click on that link, and take advantage of the free $60. That's $60, same as cash, to be used towards any handicapper for any package in any sport that you want. A lot of people have been asking me, yes, that free $60 can be applied to your full season early bird, already discounted football package. Now, football, that's what we're talking, right? And we have here Carlos Sanchez of Black and Teal. He is a Jacksonville Jaguars expert. Carlos, thank you very much for joining us.
So, thanks for the invite, Robert. Placing your power ranking and stuff. So, definitely looking forward to it.
Okay, so I have seen the Jaguars in the top 10 in some power rankings. I've seen them in the middle of the pack. I obviously have them a little lower than some other people. Where do you think the Jaguars fit in the hierarchy right now, both in the NFL and in the AFC?
Well, I think one of the reasons some people don't have them in the top 10 is because they're coming off a good season, but then that consistency, right? So they're kind of an unproven commodity yet. Like analysts are waiting on them to see if they can make a leap this year. So I mean, I'm perfectly fine with them being in the 50, in the teens rank, maybe in the 20 again. They need to prove that they can sustain that level of play next year. So honestly, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing them at number 5, but I understand why people would have them in the 20s like you. I guess become a or something like we year in and year out they can dominate until then it's not going to be particular. They should be in the 10s. They have Trevor Lawrence, they have a good coach, Doug Peterson, so they are to be in the top 10, maybe top 5 even by the end of the season.
Well, it's an interesting point that you bring up, because if you go back to 1999, that was probably the best team in Jacksonville Jaguars history, right? They went 14-2 in the regular season. Ever since then, the last 4 times that Jacksonville has made the playoffs, that's not that 99 team, 2005, 2007, and the 2017 team that was actually 1 quarter away from making the Super Bowl. The last 4 times that Jacksonville has made the playoffs, they have not made the playoffs. They have not even had a winning record the following season, only averaging 6.3 wins per season. Carlos, do you think that there's going to be a difference here with this team, that they're going to be able to build off last year's postseason appearance? Or do you think that maybe making the playoffs last year was a sign of good things to come with that young team, but maybe they take a step back this season before maybe taking a step forward?
Well, I think the 2017 team was kind of a fluke. I mean, it was like the perfect storm. Happened to have some talented, but they didn't have a formula for sustained success. They didn't have a quarterback, so the next year they don't have the culture, they don't have the offense in place to return to the playoffs. So I mean, it was more of again, I mentioned like a kind of like a perfect storm. Conversely, this team, the 2020, the 23 team, it's got the piece in place for sustained success. Like they have a franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, they have a coach in Doug Peterson, they have the pieces in there. Back in 2017, they didn't have that culture. So in regards to taking a step back, for me, a step back would be something like not making the playoffs, but still winning 7 or 8 games. I don't. I think that would be the worst case scenario, but I believe that they're ready to return to the playoffs for the second straight season and win the AFC South for the second straight year. Something they haven't in history. So again, I think the pieces are there. The culture. I think. Yes, you need talented players to win. You need a good coach to lead the team. But the I don't want to say infrastructure like the culture. I think of a term, but the culture is there for the Jaguars to continue winning games in 2023.
Okay, you mentioned Trevor Lawrence. I want to talk a little bit about the offense. Okay, now I
Totally.
gotta say I'm still not a huge Trevor Lawrence guy. I'm not 100% sold yet. Okay, I still think he gets a little loose with the ball. I think he still misses too many throws that I feel like a guy who's going to be the guy should make. He's young, I'll grant him that, but the pieces working around him, particularly the receiving core. You bring in Calvin Ridley, and the expectation is that he is going to give that offense, which was pretty effective last year, a big boost. What are some realistic expectations for Calvin Ridley and the passing game? Is he the piece that's going to take it to the next level?
Totally. I believe a great year is coming for Calvin Ridley. Ever since I mean, he's been working hard. You see the highlights. He's still the same player he was back in 2020 when he caught 90 passes for 1,300 yards or something like that. I don't remember the specific number, but the point is that he's showing he's still that same player. And even without him last year, the Jaguars were really good on offense. They were 10th in scoring. So I think they're going to pick up where they left off. Regarding Lawrence, I understand the skepticism because the sample is not big enough yet. He's only had half a season, a good half season of production, so it's understandable why key for them is to get off to a strong start and and start winning. I think that was the issue last year, that they got off to a slow start, and I mean they got off to a slow start, and then they were able to turn things around, but I think this year that they have to start winning from day one, from week one. Otherwise, they're going to start the questions are going to happen again, whether or not. So I think that's a strong start.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because again, we're in kind of uncharted territory for the Jaguars, right? They have been over the last 20 years one of the worst teams in the NFL, right? With the rare exception of these blips. What is your sense around the team, around the fan base, around the public's perception of this Jaguars team? Do you feel like people are getting a little out ahead of themselves with this team? Do you think that people are maybe being a little overly optimistic? Maybe they're the AFC's version of the Detroit Lions, right? Like the Lions are the big buzz team, even though they've been the Lions for 20 or 30 years with a history of failure. Do you feel like that the public perception here is getting a little ahead of what the actual talent level is with this team?
Not really. I mean, the local fan base, I mean, the expectations are high with the local fan base because they've seen on a daily basis what this team is capable of doing. From a national media perspective, there's some skepticism precisely because they haven't been consistent. There hasn't been that consistency throughout their history. So from a national standpoint, there's some skepticism. There's some doubts about whether they're going to be able to sustain that level of play into 2023. So I think it's but I think you could say the same about pretty much everything. I mean, there are some people that are sold on them. There are some people that are skeptic. But I think the general consensus is fair. Like they think they're capable of. They think they're capable of doing big things, but at the same time, they want them to prove it. They're taking a wait and see approach, the way I see it, and I think that's fair. Again, until they go and year out, there are going to be doubts about the Jaguars, and rightfully so. I mean, again, you mentioned it, you pointed it out. They haven't been able to. They have made the playoffs 4 times in the last 20 years. So how can you expect them to be taken that seriously? I totally get it.
Okay, one of the keys I think of this team is going to be the offensive line. Okay, Jawan Taylor is gone. Cam Robinson facing a 6-game suspension. Brandon Schrift has been one of the best guards in football for most of his career, but did not have a good season last year. Is he going to be able to regain his dominating form? Talk to me a little bit about the offensive line and how that could factor into their success or failure this season. And is there another aspect of this team that you think could be like really critical or a key or something that people maybe aren't talking about that really could have a big determination in how the Jaguar season goes?
Totally. I think some people, some analysts see the offensive line as a weakness, but personally, I see that as a unit in transition. You mentioned that Jawan Walker is no longer with the team, but the truth is that yes, he was really consistent when it came to availability. Like he never missed any games with the Jags. He improved in pass blocking, but he wasn't that much of a run blocker. He struggled in run blocking plays. So the Jaguars are expecting Anton Harrison to fill the void, and I think they're willing to roll the dice. Like maybe he struggles, but they're gonna stick with him. Like they believe there's they believe he can be an upgrade, not necessarily this year, but down the road. You talked about Brandon Scherf. I believe that he's in a position to get better this year. One thing that is going to help the Jaguars is that they're entering the second year on their offensive line coach Phil Rusher. So I think that consistency is going to help Sheriff and sophomore Luke Fortner to keep him in. I think the another thing to keep an eye on is that Sheriff was able to start the whole season. He was able to start the whole season even though he's missed lots of game in previous years, but he was dealing with an abdomen injury throughout the year, so I think that played a role in his, let's say, underwhelming season. If he manages, and that's the thing that Sheriff was in the injury report pretty much every week throughout the year because of that abdomen injury. So if he can actually stay healthy, like fully healthy this year, I think that he can return to that Pro Bowl level that he used to be with the Commanders. Now, you mentioned something to keep an eye on. I would say Walker Little, yes, the suspension to Cam Robinson is concerning, but I think the Jaguars feel comfortable with plugging in Walker Little at left tackle. I think that he's got the pedigree, he's got the tools. I believe he can be an upgrade. So talking to other people, talking to watching clips and the press conference, I think that Walker Little could be actually an upgrade at left tackle. So that's why I believe the unit as a whole is in transition, not necessarily a weakness. I think the only question mark is left guard because Ben Barch, the left guard, is on the physical unable to perform list. But even if he's not ready for the season, the team just can go with Tyler Shatley. He's already started 30 games the last 3 years, and precisely when Barch went down last year, they plugged in Shatley and they didn't miss a bit. So I think once Barch comes back, I think the unit is going to be better than they were last year.
Okay, shifting to the other side of the ball defensively. They've invested a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, both in draft capital and in free agency. And it just hasn't worked. They just were not a very good defensive team last year. Number 24 in total defense, number 29 in the league in third down defense. They did benefit from the 8th best defensive yards per point. They were able to force some key turnovers at critical times, and they were also very fortunate. They had the second fewest starts lost to injury on the defensive side of the ball. But this is a team that got lit up for 57 points in 2 playoff games. They gave up 40 points to Detroit, 34 points to Indianapolis, who was just terrible, and 28 points to Washington. I don't even think Washington played a quarterback in that game. I don't know. But what are your expectations for the Jacksonville defense heading into this season?
Yeah, totally. I believe it was a mixed bag because it was the first year of Mike Caldwell leading a defense. So he was learning how to be a coordinator throughout the year, what things work, what things didn't work. So going into 2023, I think that he knows what works, what doesn't work. You mentioned the Lions game. After the game, Doug Peterson talked about the defense having to simplify things to dial it back up. And I think we're going to see more of that this year. I think that having familiarity with the system and knowing what his players can or can do is going to help the defense take the next step. Take the next step. Also helping is that most of the starters are returning, with the exception of Arden Key. The Jaguars are going to have continuity on defense. One thing to keep an eye on, for example, is Darius Williams. Last year, he started the season in the slot, but he wasn't very good at it. Once he moved to the perimeter, he was much better, and now he's going to start the year there. So I think you mentioned that the Jaguars weren't that good on defense. I agree with that. I think they're ready. Darius Williams, Tyson Campbell, Andrew Cisco, Josh Allen, all those players entering into their second year in the system is going to help them take that next step.
Okay, who is someone, maybe one player on offense and one player on defense, who are you really excited to see play this season? Could be a new addition, could be a young guy, could be somebody that you just think is ready to break out. But is there one offensive player and one defensive player that you're kind of excited to see what happens with this season?
Totally. I think most people will go with Calvin Ridley. I think everybody wants to see what he can do after being away from football last year. But I think I'll choose Walker Little again. I'm really excited. Like I wasn't a fan of the pick back in 2021. I believe I believe it was kind of a injury red flag, and the fact that he had missed 2 seasons, but he's shown flashes that he can be that franchise left tackle. So I believe that he's going to make the most of his chance, and he's going to remain at left tackle for the remainder of the year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to watching Walker Little break out. And on defense, I would say the corners, Tyson Campbell and Darius Williams, like they get recognition, but not as much as they deserve, I believe. Some of it has to do with the fact that they play in Jacksonville, but also too that they took a step last year. They showed that they can be a solid tandem, a starting tandem. But this year, both of them are going to take the next step. Williams and Campbell, that is. Josh Allen too. He's got the first round pedigree, but he hasn't put up the sacks like Nick Bosa, like those pass rushers. So I think that having that continuity on defense, the same system, something Josh Allen hasn't had since 2020. I think the Jaguars in general, they have played for they've been in 3 different defensive systems, so that's going to have a negative effect in their development. So I think Josh Allen too is ready to break out in 2023.
Yeah, I'm a Syracuse grad, so I'm a big Andre Cisco fan. I like that guy. He's a ball hawk. I feel like he just makes plays as long as he stays healthy. I think that he's really undervalued, underrated piece and as far as safeties go. Now, okay, Jacksonville does benefit from the fact that they play in the worst division in football. That division is constantly in turnover, and it's kind of a mess this year. They're the most complete of the 4 teams. So you would think that would give them a leg up heading into the season. However, deep diving into their schedule, I don't care what the numbers say. Everyone ranks the schedules based on last season's winning percentage, which is kind of worthless because these teams this year are not who they were last year. And it's not just, I've seen other people rank them based on season win totals, Las Vegas season win totals, right? But even so, it's not just who you play, it's when you play it. And deep diving into the Jacksonville Jaguars schedule, it's really not easy at all. I feel like this is one of the more difficult schedules in the league. They have to play back-to-back games in London, which has never been done. They don't get a bye week after those 2 weeks in London. They have a divisional rival, Indianapolis. Now, the Colts aren't going to be very good, but a divisional game after a 2-game spell in London, that's tough. Then they have a short week on the road after that game against Indianapolis, where they have to go to New Orleans, who, oh, by the way, is fantastic at home. And then if you also look later in the season between weeks 10 and week 15, I think I have it right here. They play San Francisco, the Titans, at Houston, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens. I mean, that second half of the schedule is brutal. I'm sure you've broken down their schedule at some point. What are some thoughts or insight that you have?
Well, first of all, I think that I agree with you that the schedule is tough. But at the same time, if they want to prove that they're one of the best teams in the league, they have to go against the best teams in the league, right? Last year they put an emphasis on sleep and resting, so I think they're going to try to take advantage of that, those studies, that science for their 2-game stretch in London, and Doug Peterson, I believe, was the one that requested the bye week after week 8. So I think they see flying to London as just part of the business. I mean, I think that they prefer, and last season was the same. They prefer to have their bye week late in the season, and it paid up dividends. So I think it's going to have a similar effect this year. They want to they want to experiment and see what works or doesn't work. So by the time they're coming out of their bye week, they're ready to roll into the second half of the season. Regarding their schedule, yes, totally, it's rough. They're going to go against some of the best teams in the AFC and the San Francisco 49ers. So totally they're going to they're go I think that they have the tools, they have the talent to against them, and precisely that stretch in the middle of the year of the season is going to show what they're capable of not capable of doing this year.
Are you worried at all about their depth? Okay, like you can line up Jacksonville's starting 11 on offense, starting 11 on defense, and you say, hey, this team is bursting with young talent. We can play with anybody. We proved we can play with anybody later. But, seasons are made from guy, number 23 to 53. You got to have that depth throughout the season to survive these types of things. Looking at Jacksonville's roster, how do you feel about the depth right now?
Good, actually. I mean, there's a lot of
Where do you
youth.
think they're weak? And where do you think they're weak? And where do you think they're strong?
Yeah, I think heading into 2023, they don't have a glaring weakness like across the roster. They have a lot of youth. They went to the draft and came out with 13 players. So, I mean, there's a lot of unproven players, but at the same time, they're going to eventually rely on those guys as the season progresses. When it comes to I wouldn't call it that weakness. Again, I would call it unproven. Say that lots, but the depth, they have a lot of inexperience. Taylor Lacy, the rookie, for example, comes to mind. So for example, if Devon Hamilton or Florenzo Fatukasi were to miss games, you wonder who's going to step in. So I think also the thing comes to the interior offensive line. If somebody goes down, who's going to step up? I think going back to your question, I think both lines are what you would call the weakest link when it comes to depth. Other than that, I feel comfortable. Of course, if Trevor Lawrence goes down, but I think that would be true for most teams. If their starting
Yeah.
quarterback, if their starting quarterback goes down, their chances of making a deep playoff run go down, right? That would be true for most teams. But yeah, generally speaking, the Jacks have good depth across the board.
Okay, so my take on to kind of wrap this up, my take on Jacksonville heading into this season is that I do see a good young core. I see a team that is headed in the right direction and that has kind of sustainability over the next several years, that they are a team where the arrow is pointing up. However, I've been reading articles talking about Trevor Lawrence as a dark horse MVP candidate. You know, as I mentioned, I've seen them in the top 10 in several power rankings. That, you know, they're favored to make the playoffs, where if they didn't make the postseason, it would be considered a disappointment. I think that they're being grossly overrated right now for a few simple facts. That if you go back to last year, you know, heading into week 14, they were 4-8. Okay, they were not consistent last year. They got hot at the second half of the year. You know, that was great, but this was a 4-8 team. Also, they were playing basically a playoff game in week 18 against Tennessee. They were at home facing Tennessee's backup quarterback, and they were losing at halftime. They were down 13-7 at halftime. So if they don't, and then you go to the playoff game where they were very close. It was an all-time great comeback, but they were very close to losing that game by 40 points. So you have to give credit where credit's due. They did turn their season around, but they were 4-8. They did win that playoff game against Tennessee to win the division and make the postseason. But they were losing at halftime to a backup quarterback. And they did win against the loser Chargers, but they were very close to getting blown out. So, you know, if a couple of things happen differently, if any one of those things don't go that way, they don't beat the Chargers, they don't make the playoffs, or they don't turn around, I don't think anybody's talking about Jacksonville heading into this year. I don't think anyone's talking about Trevor Lawrence as an MVP candidate and Jacksonville, you know, their season win total at 9.5 games. So I just feel like people are getting a little out in front of this team. Fair or unfair from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it's both fair and unfair. As you pointed out, if they hadn't made the playoffs, there would be questions about Trevor Lawrence being the quarterback, right? The same, there would be questions about whether Doug Peterson was the right hire. So I think winning cures everything, right? As they say. So you pointed out that many things had to fall in place for them to make the playoffs. So now that they have more eyes on them this season, they have to get to a hot start. They have to start winning games. They have to show that that the that the hype is backed up, that it's warranted. Totally agree with that. So again, I've seen both sides, that they're overrated, that they're underrated. So I believe now it's up to them to prove where they stand, right? I guess the pieces are there again, not only for this year, but for sustained success for years to come, because of the coach, the quarterback, because of the front office, even Trent Baalke. So the pieces are there. So the pieces are there, and it's up to them to show that they're one of the hottest teams. Personally, I believe they have the potential, but potential doesn't win games. They have to show up on the football field, and they have to prove that they belong. I totally agree with you, and I would say I'm in the middle. I believe they're capable of doing that. I believe they're capable of accomplishing big things, but at the same time, I'm waiting for them to prove it.
Okay, well, I can't let you get out of here without giving me a prediction. So their Las Vegas season win total is 9.5 right now. So do you think you got $100, you got $1,000, whatever? whatever you got, you're putting money down on this. Would you put money on Jacksonville to go over 9.5 wins this year to win 10 or more, or under 9.5 wins to win 9 or fewer games? Where do you stand on that?
Take the over. Take the over.
Take the
definitely.
over. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Well, listen, this is Carlos Sanchez with Black and Teal. Check him out over at Fansided. Carlos, thank you very much for giving us your time and your insight. And good luck this season. For the rest of you, be sure to check back tomorrow for more videos as we are counting down my NFL power rankings heading into the 2023 NFL season. Carpe diem and good luck.